الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Bismillahi walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome. Thank you for bringing your heart. I'm happy to be back with you guys and resuming this halaqah. So today's topic is on living a transformative year. And in preparing for this, I started to think about what people might think of when they think of what a transformative year is, right? And a lot of times when we start thinking along these lines of how can I make this year my most transformative year, we think of doing new things, right? We think of learning new things. But in reality, a lot of what we need to transform are things we probably already know. But we know them on a mental level, not on a heart level. And I think that's what's missing in closing that gap between what we know and actually making changes in our lives that are transformative, is that the heart has to have an experience with what we know. The heart has to be active in engaging with what the mind has absorbed and what the mind has collected. Because we're constantly inundated with information, right? You might go on social media, on the internet, within 5 minutes you've learned 5 different quotes or maybe even gotten a few reminders about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what is it that doesn't allow for what we know to translate into actual behaviors or changes, actions? It's the heart. The heart needs to experience the beauty of what we know. So a lot of times what we need to do is not necessarily gain new information. Seeking knowledge isn't always about gaining new information, by the way. Seeking knowledge, sometimes it's about revisiting something that you've already gained, but actively engaging your heart with it on a different level. This is why you might read one verse in the Quran, right, or a chapter in the Quran, and then you go read it again a month later and you have a whole different experience with it. What changed? Did the verses change? No. But maybe your heart's interaction with it changed. Your presence with it changed. Your reflection about it changed. And so today I'm not going to really share like these wow concepts that you've never heard before. No, I'm going to share something that you guys already probably know and have heard many times. But the goal is to reconnect our hearts to it, to reignite a connection to these simple, basic truths that we've always have understood to be powerful. The first is intention. I cannot begin to tell you how much your year can be transformed just by activating the power of intention in your life and reigniting your connection to intentions. Now, if I asked you, is our intentions important in Islam? All of you are going to say what? Yes, absolutely. Al-a'malu bin-niyat, right? It's like we know this hadith. This is one of the foundational hadiths of our faith, right? That verily your actions are by your intentions. But to experience the power of intentions, you have to be actively engaging with it. You have to be building the muscle of intentions day in and day out for you to experience that beauty. When I work with students on intentions and I say start with the littlest things, make an intention for the tiniest thing, it can be very uncomfortable because we're used to just being on the go. We're used to just going from one thing to another. We think, oh, that looks good. That's a good thing, up here. Why not? Why do I need to pause? It's a great thing. So let me just do it. But we don't actually stop and say, what is the reason behind me doing this? What am I seeking? And so oftentimes, when intentions are defined in a Western perspective, it's usually about the mind, right? Mental processes. And that, I think, is changing with the rise of spirituality and, the rise of the self-help, that integration of spirituality in the self-help and psychology world. But when you look at our deen, intentions are an experience of what? The heart. You use the mind to start the process of intentions, but intentions settle in the heart. They are really the truth of your heart, the truth of what you are seeking. So you might tell yourself, yeah, I'm going to this class for this reason, but the heart has a different experience. It's seeking something else. So what does intention require us to do? Just by the practice of setting intentions, it requires us to be very honest with ourselves. So the practice of intentions actually cultivates within us truthfulness and authenticity at its core. And this is what everything that Islam teaches is rooted in. It's rooted in truthfulness. Are you truthful with yourself? So that why are we doing something? So in the Quran, the word desire is often used to describe that seeking, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in chapter 3, Surah Al-Imran, among you are some who desire this world, and among you are some who desire the hereafter. So it's that some of you are seeking this world, and some of you are seeking the hereafter. So sometimes intention is described with the word seeking as well. In one verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but only seeking the countenance of his Lord Most High. So someone who's seeking, right, that reward of Allah. And you do not spend except seeking the countenance of Allah. So what are you seeking when you're doing something? And many people get confused by this, right? Because they get confused with that concept of for the sake of Allah. What does that really mean? And so it gets complex. It's like, well, if I do this thing and I benefit from it, is it still for the sake of Allah? Yes, you can benefit from something, because think about it. Everything you do, you benefit from. Like, you're the one who benefits. Any good you do, you're the one who benefits. Even the most sacred act of worship, salah, does Allah benefit from it? No, you benefit. But is salah still for Allah? Absolutely. So sometimes we get caught up, right, in these technicalities, or like, wait, what does that mean? Does this mean if I benefit and I got something out of it, that I really do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's it's what you are ultimately seeking the most. What is the highest thing that you are seeking? And through that thing that was benefiting you, were you looking for an opportunity to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to connect what you are doing with Allah? Okay, so you're on your way to meet your friend. Yeah, you enjoyed that. You enjoy having that time with your friend. But you know what? You want to look for an opportunity to connect what you're about to do to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you look for that moment and you say, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves when people meet each other for his sake. A believer, we don't have faith until you love for your brother or you love for your sister what you love for yourself. So you think about these things. So now when you're going to meet your friend, it's God-centered. You're aware of Allah being with you as you're meeting your friend. So yeah, you walk out benefiting, but you looked for an opportunity to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and through doing that. Intention is, where are you orienting your heart towards as you do all of the things that this dunya puts in front of you? Are you looking for moments to connect to Allah? Are you looking for moments to make what you're about to do connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? There's a quote that says, it's by Thai Nyun. He says, intentions are thoughts that are directed towards a desired outcome. So yeah, you're doing all of these things, but ultimately you are seeking your Creator. You are seeking Him being pleased with you. You are seeking closeness with Him. You are seeking connection with Him. You are practicing muraqabah, being aware. Not this is higher than mindfulness. It's that now you're aware that not just you're aware of your own intentions, but you're aware of Allah watching over you and being aware of your intentions. So imagine that level of presence. How do you think you're going to walk in to meeting your friend that day? How do you think your discussion is going to go? Will you be more sensitive if backbiting comes up? Absolutely. Wait, God doesn't like when we backbite someone, right? When we talk about someone in their absence. So you're going to try to redirect that conversation. It changes you. But ultimately, what it did, see, again, you do something for the sake of Allah, but in the end, who benefits? You do. So what you did through the process of intention is that you connected your heart to the value of the thing that you are doing. So regardless of the outcome, just the act of setting intentions already gave you something. Already made you feel that what you are doing is valuable. Why do I say this? Because many times, and I work a lot with this specific struggle of people not feeling enough, right? Of people doing so much and at the end of the day feeling like it's not enough, feeling, that sense of deficiency. And oftentimes that's rooted in a lack of connection to the value of what they're doing. So if I go over with them, what are you doing in the day? They're mentioning all of these valuable things, all of these beautiful things. They're busy, they're productive. But they did not connect to the value of it. They're not connected to it. So intention is a tool of connection. It connects you to the value and nourishment of what you are doing. And also what it does is that it disconnects you from that which is not in your control. Let's say you're putting together an event, right? I remember this from my MSA days. We'll put together events and sometimes a lot of people show up. And sometimes, maybe 2 or 3 people show up. And so we would always remind each other, well, it's okay, it's about our intentions, right? And what that does is that it makes you detach from the outcome. It makes you not define the outcome of something and not define the value of something based on the outcome. So when you focus on your intentions and then putting your full effort forward in the action itself, is that it connects you to what is in your control. Your intention, your efforts. That's it. And it disconnects you from everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never put in your control. But a lot of times we function the opposite, right? We're so connected to what is not in our control, and we're disconnected from the simple, powerful, beautiful things that are in our control. Intention and effort. You see how connecting to something that we've always known on a different level can make you reignite that, its importance in your heart. And be like, wow, all this time I've been just focusing on the outcome, and worrying and having anxiety and stressing about it when that was never in my control. But what was in my control, I actually didn't do. I didn't set intentions. I wasn't connected to the action. I wasn't present. But there you're beating yourself up because the outcome wasn't good when you missed out on all the opportunities to actually focus on what is in your control. Does that make sense? And we do this a lot. And that's why it's not a coincidence that this hadith is one of the foundations, right, of our faith, and something that the scholars always remind us about. Our intention, because it shapes how you approach everything else. When you have an intention to do something and it doesn't go the way that you planned, you don't fall apart. Because you know why? Because you know that your intention was seen, right? By the people? No. By Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The good of your intention was rewarded. You already got something out of it. But if you only look at receiving in terms of outcome of the situation, you'll never feel like you got anything out of it. So Allah could be rewarding you for an action, but you're so focused on how many people showed up, how many people reacted, how many people, clapped for you, or whatever the outcome that you wanted, right? While Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his angels could be praising you. And so we need to reignite our connection to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in our control. And we have to look for opportunities to do that. We can't just say, okay, al-amalu bin-niyat, and that's it, No, you actually have to be actively looking for opportunities to do that. The Sahaba were known as tujar al-niyat, like the tradesmen of intentions. For any little action, they would sit and reflect on how many intentions they could set for that one action. Imagine then how they approached that one action. So they looked for many ways in which they can be rewarded for doing one thing. And quality over quantity. So I reflect on this a lot, and I was having a discussion about this the other day about, I wonder how the Sahaba went to bed at night and how they felt about their actions, and comparing it to this concept of feeling enough or not feeling enough, or doing so much and then still feeling like a deficiency, right? Feeling like it's never enough, and that causes you to keep chasing. And in reflecting about this, we were talking about how they had hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the opportunity to keep walking towards Allah. But they were connected to their intentions. They got value from even the little that they did. And now we live in a world where we do so much and we think more is better, and in all aspects of our life. We live in a time where more materially is viewed as better, just more, right? We focus on quantity over quality. And people are doing more, and they're engaging, and even like think about connection. People are connected to so many people, but are they experiencing connection? No. Very few are experiencing connection. But a lot of people are connected. Right? And so it's going back to the basics. Happiness is often found in the simplest things, in the foundational things that we just glide over, thinking that it needs to be more complex. We need to chase something that, is just more, speaks a different language. I don't know how to put that, but sometimes we just chase something that seems a little bit more complex than the simple things. We think the simple things don't have much to offer us. Have you ever went to a khutbah and the sheikh just discussed something simple like the akhirah, or a simple verse in the Quran, something just straightforward, and you're like, wow, that's refreshing. I haven't heard that in a while. Just straight to the point, no sugarcoating, right? And you're like, I needed that. That's the power of truth. You don't need to sugarcoat it. You don't need to make it complex. I think in the world we live today, we try to complicate things while disconnecting from the things that are simple, timeless, and have always worked. So it's time to go back to the basics. Which brings me to how I started this talk. It's transformation and having a transformative year. It's not so much about learning the new, but unlearning what keeps you from utilizing what you already know. I'm going to say that again. Transformation is not always about learning the new and learning more. It's about unlearning the barriers that keep you from applying what you already know. So go back to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us. Go back to the Quran. Reignite a relationship with the Quran. Because the more you do that, the more you are reminded every day of how close Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to you. Of how seen you are by Him, how heard you are by Him, and how He has never left you. And all you have to do is just walk towards Him, because He has never moved away from you. But it takes active intention every day to do that, and effort. So you can tell yourself, okay, every day remind yourself, what am I responsible for today? What did Allah put in my power today? What did Allah put in my control today? My intentions and my efforts. So then, you know what? How many things do I want to accomplish today? Let me try to set as many intentions for those things. Let me try to look for as many ways that I can connect those actions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And watch how your day transforms. I can tell you, but you won't know until you experience it. Until one day you're on your way to work and instead of just putting on something to listen to, you take a moment and you're just sitting there and you're like, let me look for all the ways I can connect going to work to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya Allah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Ya Allah, thank you for this job. And if you're going to work to support your family, to do any good with the money that you get, Ya Allah, help me utilize this, make dua and intend for His sake. Ya Allah, I wanna work and do good for your sake. I want you to be pleased with me. Help me do good with the money that you give me for this work. How do you think you're going to go to work? What do you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do for your heart on your way to work? Something that you do every day. You're about to cook. Say you're about to cook for your family, right? Make an intention for Allah. Thank Him. Connect to Him as you're doing it. Just be aware of Him watching you as you're doing that, as you're about to cook something, cook a meal for a friend even, right? Or cook a meal for yourself. Be present with Him as He is present with you. Watch how your heart will feel at the end of a day in which you are so connected to the why behind why you're doing things. It'll be so different. And when you go to bed at night, it won't feel like, what did I do today? Sometimes people ask that, right? Like they do so much and then they end up going to bed and they say, man, what did I do today? What did I complete? It's like because they don't know. No, it's not because they don't, it's because they're not connected. They know what they did today because they did it, right? But because they're not connected, they're on cruise control, just going through the motions. When they go at the end of the day, they can't recall. The heart wasn't activated. And so we need to live more lives in which the heart needs to be front and center, active and leading and connected to what we are doing. There's a quote, I don't know who said this, but it says, if you mean something, it's an intention. Which I thought was really interesting. Meaning intention has that value of meaning. It's something that is not just surface. It's not something that just like you say lip service. It's something you actually mean. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at your appearance or your wealth, but rather He looks at your heart and actions. So again, your intentions and efforts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at your appearance or wealth, but rather He looks at your hearts and actions. So what can that be translated to? Your intentions, what your heart is seeking, what your heart is looking for, and your actions. So there are a lot of benefits to being intentional. First of all, they require us to slow down and think about what we're about to do, and more importantly, why. We already covered that, right? They engage your mind. So the process of intention, if you're off in the future, you're off in the past, it brings you back front and center to the present. The only reality that actually exists. Future is not a reality yet. The past is not a reality anymore, right? So it really does, it stops that process of you being on cruise control. And intention requires us to be present. So as you're working on your intention, you're cultivating all these other muscles: presence, gratitude, connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They ask of us to be authentic and true. They help us put our ego in check. When you set intentions, that's when you realize your ego is coming up. Because at first you're like, okay, I'm going to do this because it's good. And then you check with yourself and you're like, man, no, I'm not doing this for the right reason. So you change, or you shift, right? You say, no, how can I redirect this back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? They promote our ability to be attentive, not just with ourselves, but to others. If you can do this with yourself, imagine how attentive you'll be and present you'll be with others. And then they allow us to derive meaning from what we do. When you're intentional and you're connected to your intention before you do something, you're connected to the meaning of that action for you. So you walk away, even though the outcome wasn't great, you got meaning out of that. You got value out of that. So you're always a winner. And that's really the mindset of a believer, right? Is that if it's like you have an opportunity to win in all situations. And then finally about intentions is that it sets you up to receive, right? You know, when you do an action, you think you're about to do something, put something outward. But by the process of intention, you're actually receiving from that action. It's not just you giving or doing, you're setting your heart up to receive. So it's interesting, when we don't set intentions, we actually get nothing from our action. Nothing that is lasting. Nothing that is valuable, that's going to change our inner world. We do an action, the action passes, and that's it, right? Like, you know, the time of the action passes. But when you set an intention, you find yourself benefiting. You know, for example, if you set an intention to do good and somebody benefits from that good because you set that intention for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you could be getting rewarded for years to come, right? But also beyond that action, you got something out from being intentional about that action. You walk away with that nourishment. You walk away with that connection. You walk away feeling like, you know, because that's what connection offers you. It offers you that nourishment. If we're not connected to what we're doing, we walk away feeling like empty. And this is something, it's a very common word nowadays. I feel empty. I'm doing all these things and I feel empty. It goes back to connection. Okay. And then we'll talk a little bit about presence. So intention and presence. So they're very much related, right? So to be present, you have to be in the here and now. To be present, you know, it's for, you know, our mind to not be engaging in thoughts that keep us from what is right in front of us. So it's a constant muscle of and an action of redirecting yourself back to the here and now. To see the value of now. I'm going to say this again because this is really important. To be present, you have to see the value of now. And that's the only way you're going to actually have the motivation and you know, want to put in the effort to keep redirecting yourself. Is that you have to really believe in your heart of hearts that there's nothing more valuable than the moment right in front of you. Regardless of how much shaitan tries to keep you, you know, you're like, you understand that's the struggle of the human experience, but I got to keep bringing myself back. Okay, I got distracted. I'm sitting and listening to someone and I find myself going off in the future. No, bring yourself back. I find myself, I'm doing a task and I keep thinking about what if. No. Okay, I recognize I was doing that. Let me bring myself back. I have to see the value of now. And I have to understand in my heart that there's no greater moment that's important than this moment right in front of me. And that's what shaitan wants, right? He wants you to be constantly concerned with the next moment or a moment that passed so you don't see the value of now. Because guess what? The present is the most sacred space. There is no more sacred space than the here and now. The present is the only time and space that you can actually have a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. that you can connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you can connect to the reality that He put in front of you and the blessings that He has put in front of you. If you're off in the future, you can't experience that. You can't connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you're off in the future. You can't connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you're living in the past. The past has a lot to teach us, right? But if you're always there and living there, even as a therapist, my approach to helping clients is not that so they can live in the past. We go to the past to see how it affects the present. The priority is still the present. But we look to the past for meaning, to inform the changes we need to make in the present. But every single day, and this is why we have these adhkar, we have these du'as that we learn, right? To prioritize our day, to maximize, to see the beauty of our day. Even when we wake up, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us life after death. Because in Islam, we recognize that sleep is like a minor death, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala collects our souls and gives it back to us when we wake up, right? And so how many of us wake up in the morning feeling that immense gratitude that the value of now, the value of what is right in front of us, this day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put right in front of us. And if you're listening to this and you're not in that space, and you're struggling and you feel like I'm never going to feel that way, or it feels so far from you, know that it takes just little moments to get there. Consistent little moments. It might feel like you're far now, but Allah reveals the path as you keep walking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never see one of His servants attempt to walk towards Him and leave Him alone. Shaitan, as you're listening to this, Shaitan's going to want you to feel like that's so far, that I'm never going to experience that. But it's not far, because you know who Allah is? Allah is the ash-shakur, the appreciative. He appreciates the tiniest step we take towards Him. Oftentimes when we translate ash-shakur, we translate it to the most thankful. But it's really rooted in appreciation. Because he appreciates. What is appreciation? It's valuing something. He values the tiniest step you take towards Him. So do you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is ash-shakur, al-wadud, the most loving, the most appreciative, do you think that He would see you striving, trying to come closer to Him, trying to maximize the day that He has given you, and He won't meet you far greater of a distance than you went to Him? Of course He will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know from Hadith Qudsi that He says, if my servant comes walking towards me, I go what? Running towards him. If he comes to me by a hand's length, I go to him by an arm's length. So even as you're making changes, start with renewing your opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if you're walking towards Him, then you have to change your opinion of Him, right? You can't be walking towards someone if you think badly of Him, right? So you got to remember who He taught you, what He taught you about who He is. It makes walking towards Him more enjoyable. And because you know who you're dealing with. You're not dealing with a human being. You're not dealing with someone who might like you one day and not like you the next day. Right? And remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us who He is. And who He is not dependent on us. Allah is who He is, and He will always be who He is. So we need to start incorporating these adhkar that remind us of the power of today. Even if you just do a quick search and put daily dhikr or morning dhikr, and practice that. Practice, even if you don't do all of them, just practice a few that you really connect with. Start with that. And maybe every week or every month you add a new one in and you memorize that one. So just look for these moments where you can redirect your heart and, try to change your outlook for the day, because it starts with how you start your day. I mean, subhanAllah, I read a lot of self-help books, and So many times I'll read, I have to start my day at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m., the morning hours. And we know from our faith that there's so much barakah in the morning hours. Or they need to meditate in the morning hours, specifically in the morning hours, because it shapes how they look upon the entire day and how they approach the entire day. So how many of us take time, I'll do questions after, inshallah. How many of us take time to really be present with these truths so that they inform how your heart goes about that day? So intention and presence. Two things that we can try to apply in little moments. Don't think so big. Think of little moments. If you're talking to your mom, try to be present. If you're doing a task, be present with that. And set intentions. Even if you're about to make a phone call to a parent, that's, being good to your parents has so much reward. Don't miss out on those opportunities, right? So like take a moment and set your intention for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before you even call your parent. Even if you have the closest relationship or you have the worst relationship, right? Maximize that opportunity. Make a dua before you call your parent. Ask Allah, be connected to the fact that Allah is with you in that moment. And look for those tiny opportunities that are doable, realistic, and you could find yourself doing them more and more. And at the end of the day, you could even start by journaling, like what actions you did and your intentions. So at the end of the day, you feel like, okay, alhamdulillah, like Allah increase me. And end with, if you are able to do intention, let's say you have a day where you're so intentional, remember to thank Allah. Something we forget to do when we experience benefit from acts of worship is we forget to thank Allah for the ability to have done that. So let's say you start, for example, praying, Qiyam al-Layl, getting up, and praying in the middle of the night, or you start doing, being grateful. You start practicing gratitude, and saying alhamdulillah and really feeling it. And you experience the beauty of that. Let's say you start setting intentions and you were able to set intentions for three actions tomorrow. Okay? And you felt connected to those actions, and you felt that like presence and that groundedness, right? What happens is, remember that Allah allowed you to feel that way. Take a moment to thank Him, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ashkuruni azidannakum." Be grateful to me and I shall increase you. And we oftentimes think of that in terms of what? External blessings, but not iman. If you made sujood and you felt so close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that sujood that you feel so connected that you wish you could feel like that all the time. Thank Allah after that. If you had a prayer where you felt so present with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, thank Him. Alhamdulillah, thank you Allah for allowing me to experience that prayer of connection and presence with you. Increase me in it. If you were able to do a good deed, let's say you gave charity, alhamdulillah, thank you Allah for making it easy for me to give charity. Anything good that you do, any act of worship, any good deed you do to benefit someone else, the way that this is also a protective factor for the ego, because in that moment the ego wants what? Wow, look at, credit. No, in that moment you attribute it to Allah. And you protect yourself, you protect your heart, but you also grow and you experience so much more benefit from doing that. I'll stop here and take questions, inshallah.
Such kindness and mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents were kind of in the middle, but they still kind of emphasize on fearing Him a lot and how He's going to be angry at us if we do something wrong, which is in one way is true. However, as a kid, when you constantly hear that, it just leaves a mark, a deep mark in your heart. And now as an adult, I struggle remove that. And it's like, for me personally, it's extra harder to connect with him and see him as a positive figure rather than, this, what my parents taught me, if that makes sense. And what I wanted to ask is that, how can we do that? Like, as a psychologist, and like, what advice would you give it to me?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of people who are struggling with that, the way that they were taught about God growing up as a very as just they were taught about him through his attributes of being the punisher or being the one who's like, if you do something wrong, he's gonna, you're gonna go to hell kind of dialogue, right? And that's created a lot of that imbalance and that extreme kind of side of, without mentioning Allah's love or without talking about Allah's closeness and his mercy, it really robs the person of an accurate view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think parents, they play such a crucial role in being the bridge between their children and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but at the end of the day, I think people teach what they know or how they were taught, and I think that for adults who experience that, it's about really spending time with the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they were not introduced to, so that they can cultivate that balance. And the best way to do that is to a lot of times we can only understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by first relating it to a human experience, because we are in the human experience. It might feel overwhelming and a little abstract to kind of like think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's like love, or without first understanding what love is in human terms. Like what does it mean when a mother loves her child? And so in one of my courses that I teach sacred self-love. Part of that is learning how to love yourself through al-wadud and through accessing Allah's love. And one of the exercises I do with my students is a guided meditation on reflecting on first someone they love, someone who they feel very loved by, and what that feels like. So we start there. So I tell them, imagine somebody that you 100% you're loved by in your life. And I want you to think of that person just standing in front of you, and this is like guided, right? So they're going through that process of thinking of that person standing in front of them. And I tell them, think of them staring at them lovingly. What does that feel like? That person that they know they're loved by. Notice I didn't say that they love them, right? Because now we're talking about believing Allah loves you. So who is somebody you feel loved by in this world? And think about what it feels like to be loved by that person. What it feels like when that person looks at you with love. And then how do you know you're loved by them? And so you think of a few things, right? Well, I know I'm loved because the way they treat me, maybe the things they've given me, things they've done for me. So we start there. And then we compare that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is always watchful of us. And it's going to be nothing compared to a loving stare of a mother. It's going to be much greater, right? Because we know Allah's mercy towards us is much greater than our mother's mercy towards us. And when you look at any, healthy mom, of course, you see the mercy she has towards her child. It's miraculous, right? It's something just, it makes your heart so soft, right? When you look at that. The amount of love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in the heart of a mother towards her child. And then you think Allah's love is greater than that. But you have to be connected and you have to really be present with these things. You can't just okay, Allah's love is greater, no, you actually have to be present. What does that feel like? What, engaging in that constant reflection. And then you think of all his attributes. Well, if I feel loved by this human person because they did this and this for me, then how can I not feel loved by the one who gave me who gave me existence when I was nothing? I wasn't a thing known. Think about this. Before you were born, you weren't something that was known. Your name wasn't known. Who you are wasn't known. So who would give existence and make you seen without him receiving any need if it wasn't out of love? Right? So even people sometimes say, like, Allah's, one time a person said to me, Allah's love is conditional. So I asked them the question of, what condition did you have to fulfill to exist? What condition did you have to fulfill for Allah to give you eyes that see, ears that hear, hearts that experience the world? Allah's love is never conditional. But if we jump straight to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're never going to really understand it. So I always say, start with who you feel loved by in this world and go from there. If this is what makes me feel loved by a human being, then compared to Allah, how can I not feel loved by Him who's done all of this for me? I hope that answers your question. Any other questions?
Sort of more of a comment, but touching upon what the sister said. So I think many of us might doubt that anybody really loves us, even in a human way. And in trying to engage in that exercise, it might be difficult for some of us to really truly believe that is possible, that someone loves us to that extent on a human level. And we then project that onto Allah, and we believe, well, humans don't love us, then Allah doesn't love us either, because we're not worthy of love. So how would you recommend that we heal ourselves of that? How do we talk ourselves out of that, or how do we get ourselves out of that mindset so we feel like we really are loved and we deserve love, and that Allah does love us, that no matter what pain we go through in life, because that's the other aspect of it, is if Allah loves me, why do I have to go through these painful experiences?
Yeah.
And then again, that makes us question Allah's love, and how do we get ourselves out of that cycle?
Yeah, no, that's a really powerful question, very important. I'm sure it's come up in people's hearts as we were talking about that. First, I'll say that feeling of going through this world and not feeling loved by a human being is a great pain, and it's something that I would say, as you do the work of just even focusing on that and healing from that, whether going to therapy or counseling, and really, that's going to make room in your heart to experience Allah's love. And I think they both go hand in hand. It's not saying, oh, here, experience Allah's love, that's going to be a solution for that, right? We have to look at things holistically, and everything is connected. So the more you do this work of healing wounds, emotional wounding from the past, from trauma, from experiences that have led to this core belief that of somebody walking through this world not feeling loved, whether they have a parent who was always harsh with them, who never showed love the right way. And I see a huge correlation, by the way, between, for example, the people who have a hard time believing Allah is merciful are usually people who did not experience a lot of mercy from their parents. So, we say in Arabic, parents are Rabb al-Bayt, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has named himself what? Rabb al-Alameen. So parents, I believe, are really that bridge between us experiencing caretaking on one level and experiencing Allah being our caretaker. And we see this in the Prophet ﷺ's life, right? That, one of the greatest questions when you're studying seerah is why did the Rasul ﷺ go through losing so many people? And the question, the answer to that, one of the answers to that is that so Allah can become his direct Rabb. And that's really the power of Islam, by the way. And I can tell you this as being in the field of psychology, is that I think one of the greatest gifts that Islam gives us is that it gives us an opportunity to get from Allah what we did not get from, let's say, our initial caretakers, from Rabb al-Bayt. And we do have that opportunity. And we see that in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. We see that in the life of one who came into a patriarchal society, who their worth was defined by whose father is theirs. And he didn't have his father, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he lost his mother, and then he lost another caretaker, and then in his most difficult time he lost one of his greatest supporters, right? But every single time he never lost Allah. He never lost Rabb al-Alameen. And that's something that we really need to connect to in all of our lives, because listen, everybody didn't get something that they needed from their parent. There's something, right? Like, parents aren't perfect, and even if you didn't have a traumatic upbringing, you might think, oh well, I didn't get that, or I didn't, so there's always going to be something where you think, oh, I didn't get that need. How can I access it with Allah? And you asked me the question of, well, that question of that people might have of, well, if Allah loves us, why go through pain? There's nobody that is more tested than the Prophets ﷺ. And there's nobody that feel the most love from Allah than the Prophet ﷺ. Because, as Rumi says, pain is where the wound is where the light enters you, right? What happens in tests is that every test introduces you to a name of Allah that you have not yet been introduced to. So, for example, you've only known Allah is this way, but then you go through a test, you need to access His rahmah, His mercy. You only know of Allah this way, then you go through a test, you know what, I need to access Allah's power over my life, that He's in control. You go through another test, ask yourself, what name of Allah is He pointing me to? But always remember that with this faith, with our deen, with this prescription of life, Allah is always giving you a link to the one who has an infinite supply of what you are needing in this world. I didn't get that from my parent. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has an infinite supply of that. I didn't get that from this relationship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has an infinite supply of that. And it's training your heart to keep looking for that while still doing the human work of healing from our emotional wounds. They are not separate from one another. In fact, one strengthens the other. Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right, we'll wrap up here. I know there's something right after, so we'll stop here. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at icnyu.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.